The way this is going to work is that Amelie has produced the slides. I have had no input on the slides, and I have not seen the slides. I will not have seen any slide until it appears, except for one which I've had like the vaguest hint at. I just want to apologise in advance. So you've had the intellectually stimulating starter from Sinjo, you've had the nourishment of a Git talk from Sam, and now you're going to have the incredibly disappointing, cheap, microwaved karaoke dessert. So I suppose we should just go ahead and start. But I just want to say I am happy. If you're going to laugh at the talk, I would appreciate it if you could laugh on mic, because that will give you a chance to think and recuperate. And I'm also happy to take questions at any point during the talk, but those questions have to be in, and I will answer in rhyme.
Oh my god.
Right, I'm muted because of that now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, let's go. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that all of functional programming is defined by this one. Single symbol, which is the lambda. So all functional programs are defined around the lambda. The lambda is core, and it's written into GHC that if you do not include the symbol lambda in any one given Haskell file, your code will not compile. So the functional paradigm is approximately 80% of what programming is. So there's functional and there's imperative programming. Functional is not imperative, and also it is not logical. If you start writing logical code, that is again a compile error. The lambda calculus we briefly discussed is where you write the letter lambda before any given string of text. Examples. This is a simple hello world program in Haskell that you'll find in most basic beginner text. If you write lambda upside down, as you may do as a beginner, you will find that your code does compile, but it will turn your screen upside down when you run it inside of X.
What happens if you run it in Wayland?
You can't run Haskell code with a Wayland compositor. It just doesn't work. That's a known bug in GHC. It's been reported a few times. One fix. Okay, so the main advantage of functional programming is that these four people, who are collectively known as the four horsemen of the apocalypse, have worked on GHC, the only compiler for Haskell, for about 80 to 90 years. It's had a lot of engineering behind it, and as far as I'm concerned, it is the best, nay, the only compiler in the world. And yeah, as we've discussed just now, Haskell code is kind of, it's beyond pure. It's so pure it cannot possibly be right, because trying to run Haskell code is a compile time error. So Haskell can be lazily evaluated, which is to say that you sit in any given comfortable chair and you just work through it by hand. I believe that's still regarded as the optimal tooling for Haskell. There are no side effects to this other than maybe getting a fat ass after a couple of years. It was developed primarily in the following 89 Norwegian cities. And we're about to learn exactly what they can teach us about currying. For one thing, curry was actually invented in Bergen. Pascal Curry was born in Harboysund, and famously, the only airport in Norway is located at what's called the tip of Norway, and if you try and program Haskell code at that airport, which I believe was tried in 1987 by Simon Peyton Jones, there's a paper about that you can read online. If you try and compile Haskell code there, you do explode. Okay, now we're going to get into lists, and this is the real meat of Haskell. This is one of the lists. People often call the first list, the one with the square brackets there, they call that the square list. The second one down is normally referred to as the curvy list. And the third one is generally called the wonky list, the unlist, and then the fourth one there is the donkey list. So list. Most commonly used to identify the ends of particularly arrogant pieces of Haskell code. We're going to look at a couple of the functions that exist now. There's only about 6. One of the functions is called explain. Okay, yeah, okay. One of the functions, explain, has rather a peculiar name. It was coined at the start, but we know it by heart because it takes input and outputs the same. The explain function is what's also referred to as the identity function. Recursive functions. Recursive functions. Hold on, I haven't got 7 fingers on my hand. Recursive functions are useful for programming recursive functions. Okay, now we're going to get into what I like to call monads, but what other people might refer to as monads. A monad is in many ways like whatever that is. I couldn't possibly say whether or not it's a burrito for legal reasons. Monads are quite a lot like them, I've heard. But I prefer to think of monads as being like the Volkswagen plant in Essen, Germany, because they take in what you might refer to as input, and they return cars. A monad is also like a box, where a box can be thought of as a functor, because I often think that boxes are like functors. That's how I remember what a box is. You put data, recipes, blogs, cups of tea. You put them into the functor, box, and you get a different kind of cup of tea or blog post. A useful mnemonic you can remember is that monads are similar to trains. We have like the Essen Volkswagen power plant, but let's look at a different interpretation. That there is a picture of. You might not know about me, but I'm quite a fan of trains. So that there is one of the first trains. So back in 1827, James Watson invented this train here, which he called the Boeing 737. Okay, now we're going to investigate some aspects of functional programming as they might appear on your standard, A-level or GCSE alignment chart. Yes, if you look at chaotic evil, you might prefer to think of it as true evil. Before this category, because if you try and do functional programming in Java, Satan himself will thank you for your work and give you £80,000 a year. Type-level programming is what we call a tier 3 functional programming technique. So tier 1 is, just using the standard lambda and wonky donkey bracket syntax. Level 2 is when you're dealing with monads, boxes, functors and that sort of thing. And then if you type level programming around about, this many times, one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse Simon Peyton Jones, Hudak Gale will give you 2 or 3 PhDs, and then you can distribute them how you want between your friends and colleagues. 2 or 3 PhDs, and then you can distribute them how you want between your friends and colleagues. So we'll take a quick look at some of the basic types in Haskell, and that will really help you on the way to level 3. One of those types is just the number 3, and you'll see this in sort of medium-sized code bases in Haskell. Between sizes 2 and 4. 2 is another of the basic types that you'll see around. Did I say 2? I meant true. The string banana. So between these 3 types, it is actually possible to show full Turing completeness. So only 3, true, and banana. These types, you can construct any computable function, so long as that computable function outputs either 3, true, or banana. And then this is a convenient syntax, this double colon. You might think of it as 2 colons next to each other. We are veering into the advanced topics here, so if you're getting lost, I can't really blame you, but we're going to have a quick look at a quick look at some of the type families, and I don't really have time to go into all of the type families, but obviously demo is the most common type families. I'm just going to hold on. There you go. So it looks like some of you have already got the hang of that. You've typed families into the voice channel text already, and that's great to see. Now this is one of the thornier topics in Haskell at the moment, and that is I/O. I/O is never safe. If you are going to try and use I/O, you will. This is an example of a petri dish with 1 microgram of I/O placed in it after only 20 minutes. If you use I/O, that is what your hands will look like. Never type the characters I and O on any keyboard, and you may have noticed that we have not used the letters I or O in any of the types or lambdas that we've seen so far. We're going to quickly dive into Haskell Prime just for a slide or so. This is Haskell Prime. I think it's fairly obvious where Haskell Prime has come from and what defined it. If you combine precisely 19 lambdas in this configuration, you summon Haskell Prime, and it's unusual that that's a problem. I'll just lay that down now. It's unusual that Haskell Prime causes you any major issues when you're programming while you're awake. Obviously, at night, this becomes a serious issue. I've been dealing with Haskell Prime for 3 years now, but only obviously during the sleeping hours. So another common site that you'll see if you've reached level 2 as a Haskell programmer is Haskelion, also known as the Lord of Darkness. Again, quite a similar construction to Haskell Prime, obviously, and this one is a problem during the working hours. I'll just lay that out now. Once you've programmed, I'd say about 3 Haskell programs, the basic Hello World that we saw earlier, and then maybe once you've had a go at implementing monads, you'll start to recognize Haskelion Lord of Darkness in the corner of your eye. I may have made that sound like a real issue, but honestly, it just chills out there. It doesn't cause too many issues. But if you try and program Java after that, you will die. So I mentioned that GHC has been in production for about 90 years. That began immediately after the 10,000 year conflict. And the 10,000-year conflict, of course, was between Simon Peyton-Jones and Simon Marlowe, and it was primarily based around the fundamental question of whether or not we should allow record types to be in any way useful in Haskell. Obviously, at this point, we know who won that. It was Simon Peyton-Jones with the answer no. I'm telling you about this now just because, quite honestly, if I don't, he'll come at me again on Twitter. So the third of the sort of pantheon of creatures that you'll come across as a programmer is Haskad, the tree spirit. His form is in many ways similar to both Haskell Prime and Haskelion, but he is tree-shaped. That is to say, there are no cycles, and that's quite deliberate because as a level 2 Haskell programmer, you are no longer legally allowed to cycle. You are no longer legally allowed to cycle using any form of wheeled transport. You may be tempted to use Haskell as a parser for an imperative language by doing all of the things I've described here, such as defining a grammar, modeling data structures, using Alexa, and parsing expressions. This is unwise. That's all I'm going to say about that. A little bit further reading for you. This is Adventuring with Pride. It's a D&D 5th edition supplement which focuses around LGBT characters. You can get it for £15 right now on the pocketworkshop.co.uk. Half of this will go to charity. The other half I will burn. And you'll get 20% off if you use the term tabletop at checkout. So, do it. I'm afraid that that's all the time I've got for this talk. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope it's been enlightening. If you have any questions, obviously maintain now, as always, that they have to be in rhyme, and I will answer in rhyme as well.
I have a question.
Sam, that doesn't rhyme, and that is a crime.
GHC is not without bugs. How do you feel about hugs?
Sorry, this is a difficult question, actually, because... Right, let me just... Okay, ask me the question again.
GHC is not without bugs. How do you feel about hugs?
So I tried using hugs for an hour or two, but it crashed my computer, and therefore it's poo.
Thank you.
Jay asks, throughout the seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, do you recommend using Haskell at all? I thank you, Jay, for that. I thank you, Jay, for that question of yours. Learning Haskell can open some doors. Don't expect to make much money. You'll end up as a PhD student doing stupid karaoke talks and trying to be funny. What just happened in this talk? Answer or I'll steal your chalk. That seems unkind, Ryan. Honestly, I was trying. John asks, monad. Unfortunately, monad doesn't rhyme with monad, so that's...
Any further questions?
No, yo.
3 people are typing. I'm concerned. Several people are typing. Trying to explain monads is a pain. Do you recommend any easier ways than the analogy with a train? No. So Keegan says, why are we all still here? This talk made me shed a tear. Although that is rather rude, I think we should conclude. So that's it from me. Thanks everybody for joining, and let's give a big round of applause, not only to me, obviously mostly for me, but also for Sam and Sinjo as well. So well done, Sam and Sinjo.